Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My name is Adil Shabana. I am Assistant Professor of Cardiology and Acting Head of Department in October 6 University. These lectures are indicated for examination for neck veins for the skill lab. So let's start with introduction for the lecture. What is neck veins, or what is jugular venous pulse? Actually, jugular venous pulse, it is the oscillating top of the column of blood in the proximal portion of the internal jugular vein. The importance of these neck veins is that, or JVP, is that it represents the change in volume inside the right atrium. The change in pressure and volume inside the right atrium. So it can be like a window to know what's going on in the right atrium. Is the pressure is low, or is the pressure high? Is there any change in sometimes even valve disease? We can predict the presence of valve disease by checking the neck veins. The jugular venous pulse and pressure are two things: pressure and waveform. So the JVP itself, when we want to comment, we have two things: the jugular venous pressure and the jugular venous waveforms. As I said, the importance of neck veins, they say that it is the poor man's monitor of right heart hemodynamics. So instead of putting invasive catheters and expensive things in order to know what is the hemodynamics inside the right side of the heart, this assessment of neck veins can give a clue for that. The pressure itself, the pressure is closely correlated with the pressure inside the right atrium, and even with the central venous pressure. And pulsations can give us a clue about the function of the right side of the heart, sometimes even the left ventricle. The tricuspid and pulmonary valves, are they okay, or they are stenosed or regurged? The pressures inside the pericardium, and even some arrhythmias can be predicted from the neck veins. Before we go, maybe from the definition you notice that we said it is in the internal jugular vein, not the external jugular. Most of the authors or most of the clinicians accept the idea, or most of the books accept the idea, that it should be assessed in the internal jugular vein, in the right internal jugular vein. Why? Because this vein is directly in line with superior vena cava and then the right atrium. So it is nearly one vertical line. So when you go from, when you go from the internal jugular vein, there is a subclavian, a superior vena cava, and then right atrium. So any pressure change inside the right atrium can be easily transmitted through this through the internal jugular vein. The problem with the external jugular vein is that although we can see it, I mean you can see it superficially, but it is not in direct contact, and it is affected by other things which make it not the ideal one to check for JVP. So again, why we prefer the internal jugular vein? First, it is in direct line with the superior vena cava and right atrium. Second, it does not contain much valves like the external jugular, because the external jugular vein contains several valves which can interfere with the accuracy of this measurement. This is in contrast to the internal jugular vein. The third cause is that the external jugular vein can pass through different facial planes, so this can affect the pressure. Also, the external jugular vein, sometimes if someone is in shock or severe hemorrhage, or blood pressure is very low, sometimes it can be constricted, and maybe we cannot see its movement. And finally, it is not pulsatile in general. It is a congested vein, so we cannot see well the waves, which we'll talk about later on. However, some people say that we can still look at the external jugular vein if you find it like congested and very prominent and engorged. This can give you a clue that there is high central venous pressure, but it is not the ideal one. Okay, so we need to see the internal jugular vein. Which one? Right or left or anyone? Actually, it's better to see the right internal jugular vein, not the left internal jugular vein. Why? Because as we said, the right internal jugular vein communicates directly to the superior vena cava and to the right atrium, while the left internal jugular vein is passing horizontally, slightly horizontally, so there is angles. It's not directly communicating with the innominate vein, with the superior vena cava. Another thing, that the left innominate vein can be compressed behind the aortic arch, in front of the, between the aortic arch and the sternum, and this can affect also the pressure. So anatomically, we prefer the internal jugular vein than the external jugular vein, and we prefer the right internal jugular vein, not the left internal jugular vein. So next time we will start to talk about how can we measure the pressure itself. Thank you.